Hello, everyone. It is 12:01 Eastern Time, and welcome to the session. My name is Rich Frazee, and I will be the host and moderator for this Ideal Conference session. If possible, please turn your camera on so that presenters can see you. Please make sure your mic is muted, though, to minimize any background noise. If you'd like to offer nonverbal feedback during the presentation, for example, a thumbs up, a clapping, or a heart emoji, you can use the Zoom reactions. There will be time at the end of the session for question and answer. Do please note that by entering this Ideal session, you acknowledge that you are aware this session is being recorded and may be posted online with Ideal content. This session will utilize the Zoom live transcription function, which produces subtitles at the bottom of your screen. Please note that the accuracy of the transcription is contingent upon a variety of factors, including background noise and the clarity and volume of the speaker's voice. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us for Engage and Excite, Tips for Effective Synchronous Online Learning. Please join me in welcoming our presenter, Tina Devlin.
Hey everyone, and thank you so much, Rich, for that introduction. I do appreciate it. And thank you, Becky, as well, for providing the technical assistance. But as Rich has already stated, I'm Tina Marie Devlin, and I'm here based in Columbia, South Carolina, with the University of South Carolina. I'm an adjunct instructor and have been going on 3 years in the Arnold School of Public Health, Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior Department. And I currently teach right now a face-to-face global health course for undergraduate public health majors. So today we're going to really talk about, I think, the few people that are in today's session. Thank you for being part of my session. So we've got a nice, small, intimate group. But I think a lot of us have been affected in some way by this pandemic and how we deliver education, whether it's designing education or whether it's delivering it to our students and colleagues. So I have pretty much done a little bit of everything throughout my almost three-year teaching career at USC, everything from face-to-face to asynchronous and synchronous. But I'm really going to focus on today my experience with synchronous online learning, which occurred, I think, fall 2020. Yes, so fall 2020. So I'm going to really give you some tips and tools that I utilized and experimented with during my synchronous teaching time. Definitely feel free to ask me questions throughout the session and stop me. Let's engage. Let's discuss. This is what we kind of the purpose of today's session. So I want to start off. We're not going to do a breakout. So Becky, you won't have to do a breakout room because we have such a nice small group. And so we can just have an open discussion. Say that again, Becky.
I said, yeah, I was thinking the same. Good choice.
Exactly. It's no need. It'll be like one person per group. So we're just going to proceed and just want to give you an overview of just today's workshop agenda. And it's always nice. I think all of us, Rich has done a great job in the planning committee with the deal, providing a nice agenda for this multi-day conference. But this is something that I do as well in class, just provide an outline of what we're going to discuss, just to prepare the attendees and the students, but also just to help keep myself on track with time, because I was born with the gift of gab and I talk too much sometimes. So I need these agendas to keep me on track and to shut myself down from talking so much. So let's start off with just an activity. I want to hear from you all, especially how, when it comes to online learning, whether it's a course you've taken or a course that you teach, or whether it's a conference like we're in or a training that you may have with your job, I want you all to tell me, what are some ways or what are things that moderators, educators do to keep you interested, to keep you alert and focused during a class or a training?
And Tina, would you like us to use the chat? Should we just unmute and chime in?
Oh, and thanks for clarifying. Yes, everyone can just unmute and just provide any input or feedback, so we can just have a good discussion. If you're comfortable talking aloud and unmuting, definitely. And I'll repeat the question again. What are, and I think I have it on a slide. Here we go. There we go. What keeps you engaged during an online meeting, training, conference, and or class? So just give some activities, tips, things that you may do or others have done that kept you focused and engaged during an online type of setting.
So I'll start. I like to keep our audiences engaged by having a variety of different activities throughout the session. I've done Kahoot before. I've done Slido. I've used that tool before as well. I've used Google Forms. I've used Padlet. So I utilize a variety of instructional technology tools to keep my audience engaged in training sessions that I do.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. So from what I heard you say, using a variety of activities, whether it's Slido, Google Form, Kahoot, so using those different tools, instructional tools to keep your audience engaged. Thank you.
For myself, I've always found it especially engaging in a meeting or a class if, there's a presentation of information, but just that time to, stop and maybe do some self-reflection, oftentimes with a Google form. And what I love about that is yes, it gives me a time to pause and collect my thoughts. And then as I type it in, just seeing what other people are coming up with. A lot of times stuff that is echoes what I'm thinking, wow, and other times I never thought of it that way. It's I love just the collaborative nature that those things can do.
Thank you so much, Rich. So I heard again that Google Form, so Dr. Haynes mentioned that, but also heard you as well mention Google Form, but having some type of self-reflection, opportunity to pause during an online session. Thank you.
And just to highlight some things that I'm seeing in the chat, taking notes, rephrasing in the Zoom chat, opportunities for reflection and sharing, using a Mentimeter, Padlet, Forms.
Thank you for those of you who contributed via the chat. And that Padlet, I heard Dr. Haynes mention that, but also others. Can someone tell me what's Padlet? I'm not familiar, so you're teaching me as well. What is Padlet?
So Padlet is an online whiteboarding tool where individuals can collaborate. So I know for one session that I've done, I've asked participants to give some tips for synchronous versus asynchronous learning, and I had two different columns and allowed them to just go in anonymously and type their information. So this is an online whiteboarding tool that can be anonymous that all individuals can add to.
Thank you. That sounds like a great resource and definitely something I'm going to look into. Okay, so it's an online whiteboard tool, provides anonymity for your attendees or your students or participants.
Yes, and they can post things like pictures, videos, text. They can post a variety of different things within the Padlet.
Thank you.
In the chat, we have a link to Padlet. Thank you for that, Karen. And here's another good idea. I have students post a picture and explain why they chose it.
Oh, okay. So posting a photo now, is that through the Padlet feature, or is that through another type of tool, posting photos, allowing students to maybe describe their reasons for selecting that?
Through Padlet.
Awesome. Okay, well, Padlet definitely sounds like something I need to jump on board with. All right.
There's voting with Padlet we're seeing in the chat too.
Thank you. Okay. What other strategies and tips do you all use just to keep that engagement and that focus in place? Because it's hard when all of us, I think, are probably, exhausted or fatigued from a lot of online tools now, but it's still important that we try to keep our students, participants, et cetera, focused and engaged for however long. So any other strategies?
I also use the chat feature in whatever tool I'm using. I use the chat feature for this, for answering questions, for discussions. So the chat feature is a good tool.
Thank you. Okay. So having that chat feature, okay. And I'm taking notes, so you all probably see my eyes going downward, but I'm definitely capturing all of these ideas that you all have shared, because I think that's the beauty of conferences like this, but having that type of collaboration, as I know Rich had mentioned. So collaborating, sharing ideas, I think that's the best way for us to really grow, when we work with one another and we share different tools and strategies. Anything else? All right. Well, I appreciate the things that you all are doing now, currently, or in the past, to really keep that engagement in place with your attendees and students. A lot of great stuff. I mean, and Padlet is definitely something I'm going to take away and explore and potentially incorporate in my class in some capacity. So thank you for that idea. And also, I like the one, the posting the photos through Padlet and having students maybe describe why they chose that. So a good way just to learn about our students, but also just to keep some discussion going as well. So thank you all for that. Lots of great ideas. Thank you. Okay. So I just want to check the time, make sure that I'm on track with my agenda and we're doing good. So we got two extra minutes that I can add into the next piece of this discussion. So through my just experience teaching, and of course, some of these ideas are from colleagues, individuals like Dr. Haynes, who's also my consultant with CTE at USC, and just ideas from other colleagues who teach as well at the undergraduate level. So something that I did, I started doing as an instructor in the fall of 2019 is I started keeping a journal and documenting everything about this process, things that were going right, things that were not going well, things that I could improve. And I just started documenting, and kind of in a way, somewhat of like a process evaluation on myself to improve and to make sure that my students had the best experience in the classroom and that they were having success, because that's our main goal if you teach undergraduates or graduate students, is their experience and making sure they succeed. So I've been keeping this journal, documenting everything, and it culminated in what I call kind of my tips to engage and excite students. And these are some things that I started putting in place in the synchronous environment, asynchronous, but also face-to-face. And so I'm going to start off, we're going to go in a clockwise direction with this circle of tips. And we're going to start with play the name game. Now, this is something that I started doing from the very beginning with my students, is learning all of their names. Because how many of us, I mean, it's important to hear our names called, that's part of our identity, is our names. And so I wanted to make sure to build relationships with my students, to personalize the experience. I made it a point to learn every single student's name. And I do that to this day, whether it's a class of 115 or whether it's a class of 68 students. I utilize different strategies to learn their names. So one strategy that I use is I use name tents. Takes a little time. You can either have a teaching assistant if you are lucky to have a teaching assistant or two, on staff with you, but I create just name tents. Get the Avery name cards in Office Depot, wherever you may be with a supply store. Get your roster of your class roster and print out the name tents. And so you can either place the name tents in front of the students at their desk if you're in face-to-face. So this is more or less for a face-to-face environment, creating those name tents, having them pick them up at the beginning of class and set them in on the desk or in the lecture hall, and using that for the first few weeks to remember students' names. And of course, that helps students as well either sit in assigned seats, especially with the pandemic and our public health precautions, but have students kind of sit in the same seat every class and use those name tents. So as you are asking questions, engaging in discussion, you can just call on that student using that name tent. And hopefully maybe by midterm of the semester, those name tents can be removed because now you've been able to associate that name with the student's face. So that's one strategy that I use. Another strategy is when you're doing synchronous type of teaching is have the students turn on video. I know that Rich had mentioned that earlier. Have the students turn on video if they're able to. And as they're logging into whatever platform you utilize for teaching a synchronous class, greet those students. Hey, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, Michael, or good morning, Aisha, etc. So starting to associate those faces on video with their names as well in a synchronous environment. Another strategy that I use, this is where I really have to tap into my memory, is in a face-to-face environment, as students are coming into the classroom, let them, especially at the beginning, let them tell you, their name. Hi, I'm Abigail or Tamika or Antoine, and do that repetition. Greet them, hey, Tamika, or hey, tell me your name again, I'm going to remember. So really starting to associate their face with their name. And you may have to ask them quite a few times, what's your name? What's your name? But it makes a difference as they are engaging, raising their hand in class. You can call them and say, hey, Peter, please answer that question. Or, hey, what did you think about that, Marianne, etc. So that's something that I do is learning my students' names is very important to really build relationships. The second strategy or the second tip, and going in a clockwise fashion, is the 7-minute rule. And I know this is something I probably read through on the CTE website, but stopping lecture, especially if you have a lecture-based format for your class, whether it's synchronous or face-to-face, is every 7 minutes, something I do is I will stop lecturing and I'll ask them a question for them to start thinking about the material and the content that we just discussed. So, hey, what did y'all think about that statistic I just provided on the number of children that die every year due to malaria in low-income countries? What do you think about that? So stopping constantly throughout the lecture to get their feedback, to engage them in discussion, to have them think critically about the information that's being presented. And that is something that I do synchronously and face-to-face. And my students, they have provided feedback to me that they really enjoy that. They enjoy how I get them thinking, I get them involved in the lecture. I teach at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. And let me tell you, students get sleepy. All of us get sleepy around that time, getting off work, etc. So I have to find ways to keep them focused at a 5:30 p.m. class. Or maybe some of you are teaching at 8 o'clock p.m. As you know, there are struggles with morning classes too. Even lunchtime, that lunchtime slump. So the 7-minute rule, stopping constantly throughout your lecture to ask them open-ended questions to help them think about the material that's just been presented. Any questions? I want to stop here. Any questions so far?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I shared a link in the chat called Name Coach. It's something, it's like you mentioned, like, could you say that again? And I would try to, write down students, like different ways to pronounce student names and for students to remember how to pronounce my name. So when I found this year at a conference, it's the like the way I have it used here, which is just my own personal link, that's free. And then the paid version is like to have it Canvas integrated and like the whole class and things like that. But I think it's useful, especially for any, you know, even the face-to-face classes, they still have like some kind of LMS presence. So to like, it would be really helpful. I haven't tried it with any of my students yet, but I know just having the sort of like hear my name at the end of my email, I've received feedback like that was helpful. I could just click on it whenever I wasn't sure, you know, how to pronounce your name or whatever, but also a platform to, you know, put in your pronouns and kind of like what Loretta was saying, to give them a way to decorate it, you know, to present themselves however they want to do it. And her suggestion was through Google Slides or in the face-to-face world, you know, actual cardboard. But just to have like an online place to do that, I thought that was really neat. So I just wanted to share that as part of your play the name game.
That is amazing. And thank you for that resource. And tell me your name, please.
My name's Fatima.
Fatima, thank you so much for that feedback. And I love that. So I'm definitely going to check out that link that you've provided. And I love that you mentioned, you know, kind of the correct pronunciation of students' names, but also using the correct pronouns. And that is definitely something that I also take seriously in my class. And I'll tell my students, tell me, you know, for one, the appropriate pronoun, but also make sure that, you know, I pronounce your name correctly, the other students pronounce your name correctly, and you tell me the name you want to go by, not a pronoun to make it easier for others, but the name you want to go by. I respect that. And I will pronounce it correctly or really work hard to pronounce your name correctly. So I'm thank you for mentioning that. Great point and great resource that you provided. So the next tip is the 3 C's, and this has to deal with communication. So having clear communication with the students, constant communication, but also consistent with your communication as well. So I know my teaching assistants, I have 2 this semester for the fall. I know they probably think it's overkill in some of the things I do, but I will definitely communicate important information through multiple modalities. So because I'm face-to-face, I'm going to give you the update in person for one, so that verbal update. But I'm also going to provide that same update via our Blackboard LMS system that we use at USC. I'm also going to provide that update through an announcement 2 times per week. Every Sunday and every Thursday, I provide announcements. So I'm going to give that same announcement via the Blackboard announcement system. So you've got the verbal piece, face-to-face, you see me, you hear it, but also you're going to see it twice a week through the announcement. So I definitely, and we all understand and value the importance of being consistent, being clear, having constant communication, and making sure that that same information as well is also conveyed in the syllabus, and that the syllabus is located in a place that the students can access as well. So I'm constantly communicating information. And another modality that I use, thanks to Dr. Haynes, is I use Remind Chat. So I'm also sending that same announcement through the Remind Chat system, which is a digital text messaging based system that students can sign up for. And this is where myself and my 2 teaching assistants can post important announcements, and the students will receive it via a text message. So 3 different ways my students are receiving important updates. And I make sure that these updates and announcements are going out in advance. So for example, we have an assignment due on October 31st. I started alerting my students to this due date in the syllabus for one, but through the twice a week Blackboard LMS announcements, verbally in class, but also via the Remind Chat. And my TAs have even mentioned, you definitely keep them updated with information, so there's no excuse for late assignments or not completing assignments. So making sure there's that clear, continuous, and constant communication and consistent communication with the students. And going along with that, going back to the 3 C's is, and many of you may already do this, is that day 1, I spend the first day of class going through the syllabus in detail. So I'm going through this multi-page syllabus, and the CTE at USC really provides a wonderful template for all instructors and professors to follow and utilize. So mine is 21 pages, but I go through it because I want to make sure that the students hear the information, they know where it's located, and they know the expectations of the class as well. The next tip is to get going with games. And a few of you have already mentioned the use of games. Kahoot is a game that I utilize in class often. I use it in the synchronous environment, but I also use it face-to-face. And my students really enjoy it. This is a way for us to review the previous week's content, because I'm constantly, excuse me, my apologies. I'm constantly reviewing information with my students. So Kahoot allows me to do that in a fun, interactive way with the students. And I tell them it's optional. If you don't want to use, your laptop or your smartphone to engage in this digital online gaming platform, you don't have to. It's optional. But if you do want to participate, it's here for you. And so every class, well, I don't want to say every, I'd say about 70% of classes, we start off with a Kahoot. And it's always going to be a review of the material. And I'll tell my students, hey, these are the type of questions that you're going to see on the next exam. So it may benefit you to participate if you like. Also, after I do the Kahoot, I always get feedback from the students. What did you think about that? Just to see how they felt about those questions. Another activity that I utilize, and I utilize for the first time, there was a period of time this semester that I had to do synchronous teaching due to some medical reasons, but I did a synchronous bingo to review for our exam, and the students really enjoyed that. So it was bingo, but the students actually created their own bingo cards. So it allowed them to engage and to participate in the game itself in creating their own bingo cards. And I got that idea online. I think it may have been a K through 12 educator who had provided this idea, and I used it for the first time, a synchronous bingo, and the students really enjoyed using that as a review. We have another exam coming up, and I'm going to try a different game. Dr. Haynes had sent me a wonderful link with a variety of games that are used at the collegiate level. So I'm going to go through that and choose another interactive game to help the students review for the next exam. Discussions and dialogues is very important. Just having the students, giving them an opportunity and a space to talk and to share. When I was asynchronous, this was spring 2021, I had to do asynchronous due to my job responsibilities. But what I did is I set aside a time every single Wednesday. The students could log in to the Blackboard LMS platform from 6 to 7 o'clock. And this was a space where I moderated. I had community rules in place, but this is a space where students could share their experiences with the pandemic, but also a space to share the global health material that they had to complete for the asynchronous class. So it was a nice opportunity every week for the students just to log in. And we could talk about everything from the healthcare system and how the USA was not doing a great job with responding to the needs due to the pandemic. We would talk about a variety of topics, and the students would lead the discussion during this time. Trying to think of other opportunities. Right now for this semester in my face-to-face, there's a course cafe section in Blackboard where the students can post questions and ask other students their thoughts about a specific topic, or they can ask students about a question they have about class that other students may be able to answer. My teaching assistants moderate that course cafe in our Blackboard LMS. And there are rules to make sure it's a respectful environment and that there is no inappropriate remarks or information being shared, and that there's no personal health information being shared in that space either. So that's another way to get my students engaged and to get them thinking and asking questions is through the Blackboard LMS in this face-to-face environment this term. So discussions and dialogue, setting aside time and a space for students to chat. And it also served as my office hours to some extent as well. If I had a student that maybe needed to carve out a little bit of time during that Wednesday just to talk with me personally, I would shut down the Wednesday chat a little early to address any one-on-one student concerns as well. Want to pause here. Any questions about what I've discussed thus far? Or any feedback?
All of the questions. So I'm intrigued with Kahoot, and I'm just kind of curious, what's the learning curve like, both as someone who's developing the content and also your students?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rich. So I will tell you, I guess pertaining to the learning curve, quite a few of the students, because again, it's a review. I would say about, as I'm going through, because I will maybe upload about 10 or 15 review questions that are either multiple choice. And I do want to give the disclaimer that I have paid for one of the premium packages of Kahoot to where I'm provided with quite a few more activities, whether it's puzzles or whether it's a poll question, multiple choice type format, or an open-ended format, and even a word cloud format. So I did upload or upgrade to one of the premium packages. That's not, you don't have to do that. You can utilize it free, but you're limited to the diversity of different activities and question formats. I would say when I do the multiple choice questions for students as a review, I would say about 70% get them correct. And then there's always that 30% that miss the information or maybe don't understand the question. So I would say the majority, they do very well with the Kahoots and getting the answers correct, but it's always that few. And that's also reflective of even the grades in my class on exams. The majority are making a B and above. And then I have maybe that 30% that maybe needs some improvement in some regards. So yeah, I would say overall, students do well with the different Kahoot question formats that I utilize. Did that answer your question?
I think so. I'm curious, as an instructor making it, and it's very helpful. You talked about how there's the basic plan and the paid plan. Is it tough to figure out like how to design these activities, or is it pretty straightforward? So some tools are really easy to figure out, others less so.
Exactly. Yes, I would say, and this is just my own opinion, is that Kahoot is pretty straightforward. I mean, when you log in, it's very colorful, it's very appealing. They give you the different plan options that you want to choose. And from there, you are provided with, okay, you can design questions using a word cloud, multiple choice, and it's pretty straightforward once you open up the specific question format that you want to utilize. That, it's pretty laid out, just typing in your questions and information, putting in the correct answer selection, etc. So it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other questions or feedback?
Tina Marie, this is Becky. I just can't resist telling you that as an instructional designer, we talk about universal design for learning and how important it is to give people information in different, give the same information in different formats. I love hearing that you're doing that because I think people kind of resist that idea like, well, I already said it, so I don't want to say it again. But the truth is, giving it to them, given the information face to face, orally, and also in writing, it really does, cater to all different learning styles and different ways that people can interact with the material. So I love hearing that. I really, really do.
Oh, well,
So
thank you.
that's
Thank
awesome.
you. Oh, I appreciate that feedback, Becky. And yes, that's very important because, many of us have, probably had experiences with students who learn differently or may have, disabilities. And so I've had a few classes, where I've, had students, one class where a student had a pretty significant hearing impairment. And I tell you, that student, they taught me so much about making sure that my class was designed in a way and how I delivered that all individuals could learn. And so that one student taught me so much. And, I built I developed a very good relationship with that student. And so that's very important to me and something I take very seriously as well, with my class and with my students and all learning abilities. Absolutely. Student sharing. And so something that I do in my course as well is I like to hear about what my students are doing outside of the classroom. And I always have to remind myself that they do more than just being a student. I have students that are athletes, that are presidents of different clubs, that have maybe done some global health work and worked in Sudan for a study abroad, et cetera. I want to hear that. I like to hear about what they're doing because they are more than just the student in my class. They are much more than that. And this is also an opportunity for students to network with one another and to get ideas, start talking to each other, And so something that I do is, I'll, for one, inform students, if you have a story you want to share, work that you're doing on campus, outside of campus, and if you're comfortable sharing that verbally in front of the class, I would like for you to give a 5-minute presentation on that. And I've had students take me up on that. And so at the beginning of class, I'll tell the students, hey, Tabitha, has some interesting information that she wants to share about global health and her experiences. And I give the student that space to share what they're doing. And these are activities they're proud of. They've put a lot of work into, and they want to share it. And so I want other students to hear that, the successes and accomplishments of other students. But it's also a great learning opportunity as well, especially since this is a global health course. And it doesn't have to pertain to global health, but a lot of my students are sharing information that's public health and global health focused. So incorporating that in your class for that student sharing, a good way to build relationship, but a good confidence booster as well for many students. I actually had a student, and I provided extra credit to those students who participated, who was actually in charge of one of our huge blood drives at USC, which is the Clemson University and USC blood drive. It's a huge competition, but it's also a public health focused initiative, donating blood. We all know how critical that is right now during this pandemic and globally. So I had the student that was overseeing this huge initiative. So I gave her the task, all right, if you can get other students to volunteer in this initiative, I will provide 5 extra points for those of you who volunteer and take part in this. And I made sure that I linked it to global health as well, but also showcasing the tremendous work this student was doing in a leadership but public health capacity. So student sharing is very important as well. And then lastly, the Wind Down Wednesdays, that definitely goes back to the discussions and dialogues. That was the name of the Wednesday chats that I designed, and that was included in my asynchronous class, was Wind Down Wednesdays. Every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern time, it was that space where students could share and discuss different topics. And it was their space. But I also made sure that students were aware that if they needed additional emotional and mental health support, this was not the space for that, to definitely utilize our licensed counselors and psychiatrists that we have available on campus for our students. So I want, I know my limits as a professional. I'm very upfront about that, my limits, that I'm not a trained and licensed therapist, counselor, or psychiatrist, but we have those resources. So I made that very clear. But Wind Down Wednesdays, it was pretty well attended for the most part. I would say that as the semester started to wind down in the asynchronous class in spring 2021, less students would attend, but it started off, I'd say the beginning to the midterm time period, started off very well attended. And the students commented how much that space was important to them, especially because of the asynchronous aspect of my class, but also because of the pandemic. Many of them felt isolated and they were indoors a lot. So they liked having that FaceTime online. So those are our tips to engage and excite. And I'm still learning and journaling and documenting what's working, what's not working. But these tips have worked very well throughout my teaching career. So questions, feedback, comments, things that you all do to engage and excite.
I just wanted to give feedback about the 7-minute rule. I put it in the chat as well. During specific synchronous, I teach mostly asynchronously, but during specific synchronous teaching periods of like 6 weeks, I do actually teach with partners. So we're like multiple instructors at the same time. And I think going forward, like I'll definitely share this with them. So we try to interrupt each other, and speak up and, ask questions and, check with students. We have all kinds of Google form inserts that, to check in and temperature checks and things. But I think if we just get in the habit and sort of like train ourselves to stop every 7 minutes and just stop. And, I think a lot of our students want to share stuff, but we move so down off the topic, like when we stop in, 20 minutes, and then it's like, yeah, it's really not relevant right now for me to bring that up. So I think like that was my takeaway, that I need to work on my 7-minute rule and implementing it really in life, not just saying, oh, that's a good tip or trick. I have to actually do the work. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a difference. It makes a big difference. And like you said, keeping things relevant and on topic and on task. Absolutely.
As I look at the clock, it's at that point where I have to be the bad guy and realize our time is kind of winding down. But I think we have time. If anyone has a quick question or comment, we can make room for that. And it's okay if we don't. I really appreciate all the the feedback we had. And again, thank you so much, everybody. Great stuff in the chat. Great discussion. This is my my time at a conference where I remind that this doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. LinkedIn, email, Facebook, etc., etc. It can be just the start of the conversation. So I love the collaboration I'm already seeing, and thank you all for all that. Let's give our thanks to Tina Marie Devlin. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everyone. This was fantastic. And thank you for the resources that you all shared in your input. So very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
As I wrap things up, thank you again so much for attending this session. To all of our conference goers, we do have a couple of some asynchronous activities that you can fit anytime around your schedule listed in the conference program. In the meantime, enjoy what's left of the Ideal Conference. Happy celebrating distance education with all of you.